Hi, so I hope everyone out there is finding some ways to cope with this crazy messed up COVID situation. In the next few weeks, we'll start sharing much more information about the driving simulation projects that are going on this year. Some of those are affected by COVID or at least influenced, some of them aren't. One of the things for sure is that our commitment to supporting youth road safety and driver licenses won't change. I thought it might be important to actually explain why this project exists in the first place, which is actually something we've never done outside of a couple of presentations. There's at least five major events in my teens back in the 90s that probably created a bit of a passion for this. The first one is my first crash. I had an awesome six cylinder 1981 Holden Commodore. That combined with the overconfidence of a 16-year-old driver on gravel, I put it down a bank on the way to rifle shooting practice. Try holding a rifle steady after going through that. Number two, I totally misjudged the speed of a truck at an intersection while driving a Toyota Hilux. Some of my friends who were passengers that day would remember this really well because I pulled out of the intersection so late that I crashed into this back wheel of the truck. If that wasn't the making of a bad night, the ute that I was in was still drivable, so I went to see a girlfriend to get some comfort. Distracted by the thoughts of the crash, I crossed a row line without even looking and saw a light go whoosh behind me in the rearview mirror. It seems crazy now, but I'd had this strange idea that trains only ran in the daytime. I actually didn't even glance. It was incredibly lucky. Number three, I insisted that it was time for my sister to learn to drive. She disagreed, but I made her do it anyway. First corner, she didn't turn the steering wheel enough, panicked, hit the throttle, and crashed the Holden straight into a bank. Again, my fault. My other little sister had an open can of tomato sauce sitting on the floor of the passenger side of her Toyota Corolla. When it tipped over, she strangely thought that she had time to reach over and pick it up. She not only went down the bank but landed in the river. There's a lot of other funny situations, examples of friends and family. I guess it wasn't until the tragic accident that claimed the life of my grandmother and great grandmother that it really hit home. I mean, 22 years later, and it still feels like yesterday. Anything we can do to prevent the grief and loss that comes with a road accident is worth doing. Add all these events together and you got most of the reason for accidents. Speeds too high for the conditions, misjudgment of another vehicle, basic lack of awareness, lack of cornering skill, distraction in tomato sauce, fatigue. As a country we spend $5 billion a year on road accidents, and most of the data from around the world, if it's correct, suggests that 90 something percent of those are human error. If they're human error, that also means that they're 100% preventable. What causes errors is simply a lack of skills and knowledge. $4.5 billion a year in damage and massive levels of grief because of a lack of skill. That's huge and also really tragic. Anyway, maybe for 5 or 6 years ago, I started trying to make a difference by teaching car control skills in a paddock to teenagers with a little front wheel drive Toyota Starlet. We could make heaps of progress in understanding oversteer, teaching understeer, ABS, and everything like that, but it was still kind of limited, repetitive, and I couldn't get insurance in case something went wrong. There was one power pole in the paddock. At the time, I was trying to use Dirt Rally to learn pace notes for rallying, and went through the Motorsport Academy where racing simulators were part of the program. It seemed like a no-brainer, so I thought, why don't we use simulation for driver training? It turned out to be much harder than I'd expected to create anything realistic. In fact, since then we've had to set up two companies, one for all the graphics technologies that have needed to be invented, as well as Co-Driver, so the first company is G-Factor, as well as Co-Driver, which has the actual driver training products. Now with all our technology and products coming together, virtual reality headsets and realistic driving simulation are an awesome combo. pulling up to an intersection in virtual reality and looking both ways, making a decision on the traffic and when to pull out. That's especially cool because you can learn from making mistakes without doing massive damage or hurting anyone. Maybe if our school had simulated driving programs when I was 15, I wouldn't have crashed into the side of that bloody truck, which was ironically packed full of expensive computer gear. Keeping an eye on updates over the next couple of weeks. I'd say keep safe on the roads out there, but we can't really drive on them anyway, so I guess enjoy the chance to save some fuel and explore simulator racing because it's freaking awesome. Cheers.